Where's my visibility in the supply chain to see if we got the order and where it's at? Where's my allocation to know how many we have left in stock? Literally, that was our first day. Where is all this? And so, of course, I'm looking, thinking, well, I know where it is normally. This is where it is. No. I've got to tell the customer when their order is going to ship. I have no visibility. All I know is we have 50.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. Irrespective of whether you are integrating two hardware components or software products, the challenges are similar. You need to understand the current state of the integrated components, but the future state is equally important, especially if the future state may not be in your control. For example, if you aim to integrate an e-commerce platform with an ERP, the only piece you will own will be the integration code. The product lifecycle of e-commerce or ERP products is out of your control. While these technical considerations are important for your integration strategy, the most important question for any integration project will be the purpose and outcome expected from the integration. In today's episode, we invited a panel of cross-functional experts for a live interview on LinkedIn who brings significant expertise to discuss how to plan for enterprise integration. We covered many grounds in this episode, including what enterprise integration is and why it matters, the pros and cons of point-to-point integration versus the centralized integration strategy, and why integration projects could be as big as ERP. We also discussed the role of iPaaS and how they can help avoid the Frankenstein of integration code across platforms. Finally, we discussed the best practices, the role of swim lanes or data flows, and integration patterns. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hello everyone, welcome to today's show. And today we have a very exciting topic that is going to be enterprise integration. So we are going to start with the introduction. Chris, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Sam. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chris Gherardini. I'm the president and owner of Turnkey Technologies. Been in the ERP and CRM space for about 30 plus years. And so integrations is the number one technical services that we're always putting out there behind the ERP implementations, whether that's ERP to CRM or data warehousing. So look forward to talking on the topic today. Thank you.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Chris, for being here. Your experience is going to be super relevant in connecting the dots for people, across the applications, as well as creating that integration layer that is going to form the backbone for any enterprise. Stephanie, would you mind introducing yourself next?
No, sure. I'm Stephanie Schrader. I have recently changed positions. So I was with the company for 14 years and have made the jump from Nashville to Las Vegas. So I am now the Senior Director of, they call it procurement and strategic sourcing. And I'm in the gaming industry, so it's going to be interesting. But I've known Sam. My background with the other company that I was with, we needed Sam's help. And so I'm very familiar with ERP integration as it's done on the ground in the actual manufacturing facility, but a lot of purchasing and supply chain background as well.
So, Stephanie, I think you have lived through a lot of different systems that are not necessarily integrated, and you sort of know the problems firsthand, the importance of integration. So it's going to be super beneficial for our listeners to know
what are the pain points when your applications are not going to be integrated.
Great.
Thank you so much for being here,
Yeah,
Stephanie.
thanks for inviting me.
Tim, would you like to introduce yourself next?
I'm Tim Harrison, the VP of Sales at Warm Commerce. And we have a cloud-based supplier relationship management software that streamlines processes in the procurement and supply chain management side of things.
Yeah, and Tim, I think your background is going to be super beneficial as well because you, in my world and in my mind, the way I look at the enterprise architecture or the whole world of ERP, your application is going to be slightly more edge application. And one of the questions that your customers are always going to have is, does it integrate with my enterprise architecture? So I think
definitely. I fielded that question so many times over the past 17, 18 years. When we were selling different types of software. So not only on the software that I'm doing now, but in the past where we had inventory control software that were driving systems. Yeah, it was always a question. How do we integrate this system? How do we interface it, etc.?
Amazing. So super excited to have you here. Now we are going to start with the topic, and I am going to start in setting the stage to explain what enterprise integration really is and why it really matters for companies. So, Chris, I am going to start with you. For people, let's say if they might not be familiar with enterprise integration, just because they might be on slightly smaller systems, they might have ad hoc systems for their accounting, maybe QuickBooks, maybe Salesforce, maybe inventory software, maybe point-to-point integration, but they don't necessarily have that enterprise integration strategy. So why does enterprise integration matters and why companies should be thinking about integration driven architecture is how I would like to define it.
It's a great topic, Sam. And again, as you think about organizations, everybody's got what we call siloed applications. That means that we have data sets in a couple of different systems that we keep in sync manually. Okay, so imagine that. I got a customer here, but they don't talk. Now they're out of sync. Okay, so we just, an inherent risk in having systems that are not integrated is we end up with data integrity and data reference errors. And so as you think about just the strategy where you have two systems that have the same information, typically the strategy is to integrate them. Okay, and you can do a little bit, you can do a lot, you can do extensive, but you really, as part of the process, you're looking at, well, where's the source of that? Meaning, where do I maintain my customer master? And meaning, does everything else kind of replicate to that? In the world of e-commerce, does the customer come from the e-commerce system and end up in the ERP system, and then the order flows behind it? Again, think if we had to rekey all the orders that come off of our website. So you think about the strategy to integrate data. Again, you're trying to eliminate redundancies. You're trying to have a single point of entry, meaning I don't want two people putting the customer in 5 places. We can easily compute the cost savings by doing integrations, data accuracy, timing, cost savings. And again, we attack the problem. I've got 5 records a month, key it in. I got 500. Integrate it. So again, there's rationalization as to where I'm getting an ROI, but there's certainly critical information sets that you need them moving real time so that everybody's working off the same data, whether it originates here. But the integration strategy, again, it's not unreachable. It doesn't matter what size company you're in. There's going to be pain points in certain data sets that you really need to integrate them to ensure that both people, both audiences, everybody's looking at the same data in a real-time manner. So I could start with that. There's certainly a lot more I could say.
Yeah, and you bring some very important point, and I'm going to touch on some of those because some people may not be familiar with these things. For example, let's say if you are talking about a very small customer, and since you mentioned the example of the e-commerce, portals, and the majority of the manufacturers, distributors, retailers, they are probably going to have some sort of e-commerce presence. So let's say if they have e-commerce on, platforms such as Shopify, BigCommerce. I don't really care which product they are on, but what I am talking about is, even if they are on Shopify, typically they are going to have, let's say, multiple brands. They are going to have multiple products. And sometimes they all could have different databases. And when they have the different databases, even though they are part of the same platform, sometimes it may be harder for businesses to understand when they are on the same platform, such as Shopify, why are these databases not talking? The same example could apply to your accounting applications as well. For example, let's say if you have 2 entities, especially when you talk about North American businesses, Canadian businesses are always going to have some sort of US presence. US is going to have some sort of Canadian presence. When you have that, you are going to have 2 QuickBooks databases. and they are going to have their own customer master. They are going to have their own vendor master. They are going to have their own item master. So even if you are on one system, you will still need the integration on that. So do you have any clarifying comments? Anything to add there, Chris?
Yeah, and I think those are good points, Sam. And I think the key thing is to identify what's the master and what's the slave. I think there's a hierarchical relationship that's going to exist in any organization, and that's just that simple. Where do we assign the customer? Who owns that? Where do we create the product? Who owns that? And I think that kind of determines hierarchy and downstream flow or upstream flow. But there's no question that that's a challenge, especially with two databases. And there's technology within some of these accounting applications that help you manage a customer master across multiple companies. They have what are called multi-entity products, but certainly that's it. The more you propagate the same data in different places, the more room for error that you have and just mistakes. I think that's it. Customer service, customer experience is the most important thing in the world today. And if you've got the customer information right here, wrong here, I sent it to you with the wrong price, the wrong sales tax, you can just imagine the ramifications and the corrections that you have to do to fix the data after the fact. So cost continues to increase. So that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and by the way, just to add to that, you are also adding delay in your customer service processes. So let's say if you have any sort of manual reconciliation in between your transaction, for example, let's say if your e-commerce is not really talking to your ERP and you are manually entering that order, so what is going to happen is you are going to take, let's say, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, maybe if you have superhuman, they can probably do it in 1 minute, but they are still going to take that 1 minute to be able to enter that transaction. And then you are adding that minute in the processing of the transaction when you could expedite that by integrating and making sure that these two systems are talking to each other. So now I'm actually going to move to you, Stephanie. I always love to have you on the panel, and the reason for that is because you are true representation of the customers, especially the customers who are trying to grow at this point of time, because you have seen all the growing pains. Okay, when you started, you had sort of the small, the smaller systems, the isolated systems. Then you had pains, and you had to integrate these applications. So, would you like to share any stories that you might be able to share with our listeners in terms of why integration matters and why it is so important?
Sure. I'll touch on what Chris just said, and you didn't say it this way, but you implied it. It takes a lot of planning.
Yep.
To be able to, in my case, the company that I came from, and we can talk e-commerce, it was retail-based e-commerce, but knowing that you had NetSuite and an Infor product called Visual, two different systems, and then you had different pieces like Shopify for e-commerce or different platforms that were being used. Just the nightmare that ensued without that planning piece. Yep. We basically thought we could just at some point in time do a little training, flip a switch, and we're all in Visual now. And the heartburn, the nightmare that ensued after we did that because of not planning. So I think that's the first step, is you have to sit down and it has to be sketched out just with pencil and paper. How do we want to do this? And to Chris's point, who owns what part of all of this, and how is it going to flow? That takes some time, and a lot of people don't have the time. Companies don't have the time. We're all busy. But with the case of the company Pride Manufacturing that I was with, in retrospect, we could have done it differently. But when we saw where we were, we did see many things that had to be done. And one of the things that I suggest to people is going outside of your own IT group or system. In this case, this is one of the ways that I met Sam, is because of doing some work for us, saying, look at this, it's a bit of a mess. How do we even go to the next level? So we did use Sam's resources, and then kind of reshifted and refocused and went down a little path about the time that I was leaving to come here. But even with the company I'm at now, and you see as you jump around, and I haven't jumped very many times, but you see so many similarities. Larger company that I'm with now, under new management, want to do things right, get things right. But I am dealing with trying to pull reports from Oracle in the United States, and our Australian division uses something totally different. They use Agile here for engineering docs in the United States. They use something totally different in Australia. So again, I feel myself back into that mode of, here we go. We're trying to merge it all. They also use something, and you'll be familiar with it. I'm not as familiar. Mapex, old Mapex.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that in the United States is thrown in. So you have all of these different places where you're trying to go to combine information, and we're manually combining. So there's errors, so it really is tough, but I see that need again for integration. So I love being on here to listen, because I learn things that I can take back and say, hey, did we think about this? I just heard Chris or, Matt or Sam or Tim say this.
Yeah, so you actually bring some very, very, very important point, okay? And one of the things that I always like to emphasize is the planning aspect. And one of the things that you are going to lose without that tight integration between the systems is going to be planning, which most people don't realize, because what they are going to feel is, my SNOP process is broken, my demand planning is broken, my inventory allocation is not working. But what they don't realize is it is not working because of your broken integration that you have in case of your ERP or e-commerce is not talking, because there is no centralized state of your inventory. But they try to solve this problem from the business perspective, but that is never going to be solved because your foundation is broken and you are actually trying to build a house on top of that. So I'm pretty sure you are going to have some more colors to add there, Stephanie, in terms of your experiences, why planning did not work in your case because of this isolated system architecture that you had in your existing company. And I don't know how much you are going to be able to add for the new company, but I would definitely like to hear some more perspective there.
So the new company that I'm at, I've only been here, this is my second week. So when I say it's a new company, it's a new company for me.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm thrown in. But as I'm being thrown in, and for somebody like me who's in the supply chain procurement and sourcing space, you come in and you already know that part of your job. It's just a different widget, different industry. This is highly technical. We're in the gaming industry. We are the slot machine builders. Yep. And poker game and video games, etc. So I'm thrown in very quickly and just seeing the lack of integration. Okay, so as I go forward, I'm sure I'm going to see a lot more, but I can already see I've already honed in on 6 different softwares or platforms that are used that don't communicate with each other, all with us all being in the same company. They're working on that from the new management level, which is fantastic because they see it's important too. But as you all know, even with planning, it takes quite a bit of time. There is no getting it done very quickly, and if you do, you tend to fail. From the old company that I was at, I don't know exactly where they are today, but I know that they were moving forward, realizing some of their mistakes from lack of planning. And when I say lack of planning, I mean there was no planning, 0. We literally thought that we could do this the way we had done it before, but the company that we bought before was not a manufacturing company. Okay, so we went and thought with a new e-commerce company that we've purchased, we could just flip the switch, kind of like we did with this other company we bought, and didn't really do the due diligence to realize that Shopify has to, and as Chris's point, customer is the focus. E-commerce business, it's all about that customer. Shopify wasn't talking to our system. So customer service on day one was, where's my tracking? Did it ship? Where's my visibility in the supply chain to see if we got the order and where it's at? Where's my allocation to know how many we have left in stock?
Yeah.
Literally, that was our first day. Where is all this? And so, of course, I'm looking, thinking, well, I know where it is. Normally, this is where it is. No. I've got to tell the customer when their order is going to ship. I have no visibility. All I know is we have 50 and we have 300 on order. So lack of planning led us to chaos. And a lot of companies go through it. We're not the only one. Didn't have anything to do necessarily with leadership. It was kind of not knowing what we didn't know. Learned really quick, let me tell you. So, but as I said, I don't know, Sam, where they've left it today, but I know they were on the right track after a new IT person was hired and some help from you and some other companies that came in to do some warehouse management systems as well to try to tie that in. I know they were on the right track, but without the planning and without the buy-in from top management and the understanding of how serious it is and how critical it is, your success rate is going to be extremely low.
Yeah, love it and love those scenarios. I think those problems are going to be the most important when we think about the integration. And obviously, as you touched, the planning is super important, and that you have to do on paper. It's not really the tool argument; it's really the business argument. You know how your business architecture is going to be, how your different systems are going to be interacting with each other as you are serving your customers. So I'm actually going to move to you, Tim. Now, Tim, from your perspective, why is integration really important? Why it matters?
Yeah, so it's really important and why it matters because these integrations are, basically time savers if they're done right. If they're done right, when what I've seen in the past is people put in a piece of software and they say, "Oh, we'll integrate it later." They never integrate it. So then you have, operators doing dual transactions, one in one system, buy a piece of equipment, and then another in, SAP or whatever they're using. So you end up with these dual transactions, and then over time, those people that's just part of the process. And what I find is that if you do those integrations up front and plan for it, then you don't run into those situations of people saying, "Well, this is just how we've done it. We've always just did dual entry." And so that's one piece of it. The other piece is the quality of the data. So with the integration, you have less, human interaction with the data. And whenever we introduce humans into anything, there's the risk of, a quality risk, basically. So for me, I've always looked at it as, if we can put a barcode, reader that will actually scan a barcode instead of somebody just simply having to type that and integrating that, at a very low level, integrating a barcode scanner with the piece of software so that it can actually pull that data and manipulate it and output it the way it needs to. By removing that step, you're removing the risk of an operator, mistyping in a serial number or something else of that matter. So to me, it's the productivity side of it is very important. You gain a lot of employee productivity by having these integrations so they can do what they're actually getting paid to do instead of data entry. And then the quality level, maintaining a high level of quality with your data. And I guess that ties into this other issue is, okay, when you do have an issue with your data, it's much easier to find the root cause of that if you don't have to go and track along how many people touched this data, who typed it in here, who did this, who manipulated it in different points. If you just say, nope, the data was entered here, and here's the way it flowed through the system, it's just much easier to find those root causes.
Yeah, and I love the way you have described this whole human interaction thing and, how that can really introduce a lot of variability in your process. And I'm probably going to have a story for everybody, and it has nothing to do with the integration of software, but that'll give you the perspective in terms of why this matters so much. So I was talking to and this is really relevant to you, Tim, because this is coming from the warehouse. Okay, so I was talking to one of the really large warehouse robotic process manufacturer. Okay, and I was talking to them and I asked, okay, how do you do your processes? And one of the comment that they made is, you know what, I don't like to mix humans with robots. And I asked, why? What is so challenging that you don't like to mix humans with robots? And they said, you know what, humans are super gifted. I mean, they can make a lot of complex decisions that robots cannot. So when they are actually going to put the, let's say, a pallet on top of a pallet, then what is going to happen is the humans are never precise in terms of the way they are actually going to arrange those pallets. And for robots, that's going to be an exception. Okay, for what robots really want is, okay, I can only go, let's say, 0.05% of this and 0.05% of this. If you are going to go more than that, then I don't know what you're talking about. I am going to error out, and then you have to call the technician. So that is the importance of human intervention in any process, whether you are talking about the physical process or you are talking about the integration process inside the software. Thank you so much for that, Tim.
Oh yeah. I've seen so many times where robots have crashed into things because a person, I've seen where people have loaded parts into certain locations and they did it just did a little off, and the robot crashes. And then, people spend so much time resetting these robots, getting things back to a steady state. And really, if they would have just had the robot and a better maybe vision system, I think that's, maybe off topic here, but vision systems have come a long way where now you can have robots are a lot smarter, but still, when you introduce people, like people just we're not perfect. So when it comes to entering data, especially, we get in a hurry, we get distracted by whatever else is going on around us, and that causes issues when your business is running off data. That makes it's very impactful.
Yeah, one of the key takeaway that I really wanted to emphasize from this story is integration is integration, whether you are integrating two physical elements or you are integrating two software element. Sometimes
exactly.
What people think is, two software, it must be as easy as just gluing them. Just integrate them. Okay, it should be like 1 or 0. Just do it. And you should be able to do it overnight. It doesn't work that way. Okay, Chris, you have a comment there.
Yeah, to that point, I thought I'd just bring up that there are different types of integrations out there. And, to speak to Stephanie's point, you think about, just to educate the audience, transactional, right? I'm moving a transaction from system A to system B. The e-commerce transaction's coming down. Sometimes it's master file replication, which means the e-commerce site needs to know what's the stock on hand for that item. So when they look, it says in stock, order comes in. And then there's data aggregation type of integration work. So what Stephanie was talking about, where I've got 3 systems and I'm just trying to get a composite view, that's an integration that would happen into a data warehouse, perhaps, where I'm trying to get a consolidated view of the data. And then there's what I'll also refer to as one-time integrations, because everybody thinks the first time that we land on a new ERP, we're running integrations as well. We may only run them one time. Actually, we'll run them test. When we go live, we run them one time and then we're done with them. So one-time integrations, repeat integrations, whether they're transactional in nature or if they're just data aggregation type of integrations. And then even you went further, systems integrations. Hey, I'm trying to integrate a picking system in my warehouse with my ERP. That's a different type of integration. Now we're trying to integrate 2 systems, not from a data aggregation or transaction, but to become symbiotic with each other. So that's a whole different type of an activity. No different than there's more technical integrations, like when somebody puts an organ in your body, right? They're trying to integrate that into the rest of your system. But conceptually, right, we're building these bridges between the systems. And I don't think there's any question about, as the volume necessitates, it's humanly impossible. And I've got a great story. I have a company that's in advertising services. They have 600 people, and everybody's got a credit card. When the credit card bill shows up at their office, I kid you not, it's an 8-foot tall stack of paper. 1 month, 1 credit card bill. 8 months, or 8 feet tall credit card statement. Now, you set that on your AP clerk's desk, key it in. It's humanly impossible, number 1, to do that in a timely manner. Number 2, to be accurate. Number 3, I can't even find my mistake because, again, so now we start moving where human possibility necessitates automation. And I think that's the best way to put it. And the other comment that hasn't been made is the business processes or the overarching, right? An integration is one piece of the business process because there's something that's going to happen before. And as soon as it finishes, there's something's going to pick up and happen after. Yep. And another big imperative, if people are thinking about this, is it's error handling. And right, does it always work? Okay, so there's a lot of considerations, and I think Stephanie used the word planning. It's design. Number 1, you're solutioning it. You're looking at the business processes. Hey, this is a workload. We can't have humans processing, but again, as we look at planning and then design, and another term is swim lanes, right? They're swim lanes. When you bolt up Shopify, we know they're swim lanes. What am I sending up to Shopify? Products, stock, a tracking number for that order that just shipped. What's Shopify sending me? An order. What else? An update to an order, a cancellation. I mean, these are all swim lanes, and I think it's imperative, as Stephanie said in the planning process, is that we have to identify every one. These are every flow of information in each direction. Swim lane, how small, how large. Anyway, that's part of that terminology, but it allows you to begin to block and tackle and start rationalizing. Is this a swim lane that needs automated? Not enough volume. This one, absolutely. So again, it helps with that planning conversation, as Stephanie pointed out. And it's imperative. Even to do mock scenarios, to do simple proof of concepts, just to validate all these things that we think are going to work, we need to make sure we do that before we actually execute.
So, Chris, one of the things that I found interesting, Stephanie mentioned it earlier, bringing in the right people, because what you're talking about, there are so many organizations that are out there. They're thinking, I need to do something about this problem I have. They don't even know where to start. So, talking about swim lanes between Shopify and an ERP, they wouldn't even know. They just know, I need Shopify to work because that's where my orders come from. I don't know.
You need an integration partner. That's it. You need someone that does it to at least provide guidance. Whether you build it in-house with some technical talent, you're correct. That first premise is who can come in here and lead us, give us some answers, give us some experience-based suggestions, meaning we did this for this customer. Here's the swim lanes. Oh, well, why do you need that one? Because Shopify does this.
Yeah.
Oh, what about credit cards? Oh, yeah. You're gonna authorize it here and settle it in the ERP. Well, that's a different type of a handshake where now, so you're right, Tim, exactly. So
I think in retrospect, looking back on our past, what I would call failure at first, leading up to hopefully a success at the company that I was with, to your point on, Chris, on what you were just saying, I think a lot of it stems around knowing that it's okay to outsource and knowing that life is getting more technical every day. Just our business life is more technical. And just having an IT department, we assumed our IT department could just do it. They'll just do it. They know what to do. No, they know to ask the questions of what product codes, what information needs to be put into the system, but they weren't tasked to do the whole due diligence. So I think in this day and time, you really need to leave it to the professionals. And I'm in purchasing, so I don't want to necessarily spend the money outside of the company, obviously, but I'm smart enough to know that it may not be the expertise inside here that gets us to the next step. To your point, you need someone, and to Tim's point, you need someone to lead. You need someone to come in and tell you what you don't know, set it up, even if that's all it is the due diligence part of it. This is everything you need. Now you've got it if you're on your own. But I really think when it comes to any type of technical things, we really need to start looking to experts. That's my opinion. And I had a question real quick. What would be your opinion, panel, here? If you have a NetSuite and a Visual, and the choice, there was no choice. With us, it's just you're going to this one because this one's cheaper and we're used to it and this is what you're going to. Are there ways to integrate those two systems, or with my new company where you have Australia on one and maybe, Tennessee on one and Las Vegas on one, different systems? Can you integrate those without having to just go to one? Can you pull them all into, like you said, a data warehouse type thing where you don't have to necessarily get rid of what you're using, but there's a new view at the end?
So to your point, Stephanie, yes, systems integration, when there's ERP systems and disparate ones, some people will pull them in a data warehouse for reporting, but I've got other clients, and real examples and we're talking about integrating into NetSuite, for example. So we've got two-way integration with NetSuite with some of the Microsoft products, but we have other companies that will actually set up yet another entity in NetSuite, and they'll suck in the financial data from the other system. And guess what? Now my financials are all there and I can consolidate. And I think the conversation is still, what data do I need to see natively right here versus asking them for a report? Some people replicate a lot more than that. They want to suck in the receivables and the payables. We've got a client that replicates the entire system into another subledger inside of the ERP. Why? Because they want it all right there. It runs at night and it's just right there. It's next to their company, consolidated financials, and they don't really know that the business isn't being run in that business, but it's that transparent. Whether you're integrating a journal entry as opposed to doing it in Excel consolidating, some people would import it and put it into a company table right next to their live company in NetSuite. And that's totally doable. And that's how you typically supplement some of the inefficiencies of these older products like Mapix. Mapix is a boat anchor. But again, to suck the Mapix data up into a current platform, and guess what? All the BI over here lights up. Who cares about? Leave Mapix alone if it's running their business processes, but to integrate that data, and it may not be a production company, but you may integrate it in such a way that, again, all the dashboards and everything in that product light up the Mapix data like you've never seen it before. And that's a very common approach, as opposed to saying, I got to replace this. But you come back and say, well, where's the deficiency? Is it just analytics and reporting? Some people would just pull it in a data warehouse and stop there, and that's another way to do it. Other people, maybe it's for consolidations. I've got a group right now that's in 2 different systems, and that's exactly what they do. They consolidate the journal entries, the financials from the other into that one system. So very doable.
Yeah, and I would always ask the question, why? Why do you even care about having multiple systems or not? Like, what's it matter? And then usually get I think the financial department usually drives those conversations because they want to be able to report everything out very quickly and easily in a consolidated fashion. But if it doesn't really matter and reports are being kicked out the way that they need to be, why change? And I'm all about making change for progress, but sometimes you just don't need to. If it's working, then don't change it. But I think what usually happens, you start going down one road and, you ask the question why, and then you start getting pitched, different ideas by software vendors of, oh, you can also do this, and this is another benefit. And then that starts opening up Pandora's box of, oh, wow, well, we need to start from scratch. And, then you start going down that rabbit hole. But I always start off with why, why are we making a change?
Is it necessary?
If we need to integrate into Mapix, then we need to throw out Mapix because, getting data out and putting it in, that's one thing. But, you need it to integrate? Oh, it won't. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah. No.
So, guys, one of the key takeaways that, that I am getting from this conversation and that I want to make sure that everybody is getting as well, as integration is going to be as complex as your ERP project, which means, let's say, if you are trying to custom develop the ERP by yourself, which means you would need to know about your business, what you are doing. You should be able to write each of the requirement at the line level. And when I say need to write the requirement at the line level, it is not going to be as simple as, hey, I'm looking for accounts payable. Okay, typically that's how ERP requirements are written when you are working with a very unsophisticated customer. Typically, to write or to be able to integrate any software, the requirements need to be written in a way that, okay, if the user number one performs this action at this point, what happens next? Okay, and if that happens, what is going to happen next? So it is going to be that detailed, which means you need to know your own business, but then you also need to know these products. So in case of integration, you have two ends. Let's say if you are integrating your Shopify with NetSuite, which means you need to know Shopify, you need to know NetSuite, and then you need to know your third layer as well, because your integration is going to ask at least 1 million questions in terms of how you want to design those swim lanes. So don't feel that integration is going to be just as simple as, hey, I'm looking to integrate these two systems. It's going to be a really well-defined software project, which is going to have a dollar amount associated with that. So that's why that why is important that Tim is asking. So when you are asking why, okay, what is going to be more expensive? Is integrating these two systems going to be more expensive and more error prone, or is it going to be, let's say, if we bring everything in the one system, is that going to make your life easier? So depending upon the constraints, depending upon how much money we have in the part, in the shared part to be able to spend on the IT, based on that, I think we need to decide. But overall, the point or the key takeaway from this is the integration is not supposed to be as simple as your binary decision. And sometimes salespeople make it super easy. And I would make one comment: when you are buying any software, they are going to say, you know what? It can integrate with anything. It has got the most magical word called API. Okay, API is not supposed to mean anything, to be honest. Sure, API, the only thing API does is it provides an easier way to be able to integrate with that software so that you don't have to go through the database. But as such, you still have to integrate. You still have to design the logic. And I'm pretty sure Chris is going to have some follow-up comments there, with respect to this sales pitch, and tell us, why the API pitch is not right. And I think, people should be looking at more when anybody says that, it has got API and it can integrate with anything.
Sam, if anybody, if a salesperson says that this software can integrate with anything, you need to go find another salesperson. Like, absolutely walk them out the door. There's nobody. That's like such an absolute statement that as a salesperson, they just need to be, just cut them off the list. Who knows what else they're leading you down. So sorry, Chris, but I just felt like I needed to say that out loud.
I'm sorry. I'm a sales guy that says you can integrate it with anything. To a point. Anyway, but let's dial that back. So back to, it's got an API. That doesn't mean it addresses the destinations or the source information that you need to touch. So I think, we go back to the design. What are the entry points into the system that I have to integrate? And you might say, number one, can you key the information into the system that you want to integrate? And they're like, no. Well, you got a problem, because the system naturally will not accept the data you're trying to jam in there. You're not going to find an API that's going to drop it in there. And I said, so the API is not the magical easy button. It's just not. Now, if you're a developer, you might think, okay, it can make it easier. If the target is accessible through that data set, through that API, but it may not, but I need to hit 2-3 more fields. Guess what? Now you got to create a custom destination. So it's all about sources and destinations. Is the source data in the form that I need? I can extract it. You may need to compose it. Again, the destination, does it exist? Can I key it in? No. I've got to customize. So you could have a lot of complexity on both sides, I think, is your point, Sam. So, yes, can we do integration with just about, is it supported? Does it make sense? Does it violate gap? Right? Again, am I trying to create an integration of a business process that I can't even do it manually in the system, which means the authors did not intend for you to put data in that manner. So there are a lot more decision points before you think, got it. It's open. Again, open architecture is a big conversation. On-premise applications, they're a lot more open, and that is a very important tone, but you still have to understand is how open is it? And again, are the entry points that I want to hit available, and are the data points I want to extract accessible? You get into cloud software, their entry points are a lot different. It's a lot harder to get information into and out of cloud-based ERP systems. So you've got to understand, well, what's the access method? How do I get it out? How do I get it in? How much effort does it take to customize an entry point if it doesn't exist out of the box? So again, it sounds easy. And sure, open architecture, everybody's looking for that. And Tim, generally, most systems can be integrated, but there's a cost to that. And I think most people are just assuming that, this is no cost. We did an 8,000 hour integration project. You do the math on that. Add a few zeros times 2. Okay, did they spend? It's a lot of money. Yeah. And that was a very, very complex integration. It took two plus years to build. So no, they're not cheap in the complexity. So anyway.
Yeah, amazing. So I think this discussion is actually going into the next territory that I really wanted to touch. So let's say if we talk about integration, there are different ways of doing that, and you touched some of those. So there are always going to be pros and cons of every approach that we take. Okay, there is always going to be some sort of dollar amount associated with each of the approaches. Some are going to be expensive, some are not going to be as expensive. So let's say if we look at the P2P integration, and that is called point-to-point integration, which is going to be, let's say if you have 3 or 4 different systems, now you can connect Shopify directly with your QuickBooks. And typically when you are working with, let's say if you have a Shopify developer in your team, what they are going to recommend is, hey, it's very easy because I can connect directly Shopify to my QuickBooks because the only thing I really know is the Shopify. That's why they are recommending it, right? Now, if you spoke to your QuickBooks guy or Visual guy or Matrix guy or Microsoft guy, they are going to say, you know what? I can do it in Microsoft because the only thing I know is Microsoft. But there are always going to be pros and cons of creating the centralized integration strategy versus creating these point-to-point. So, Chris, I'm actually going to come back to you again. So what are pros and cons of the point-to-point versus the centralized?
And I think that it can be a hybrid approach is what I'm going to say. So there's not a one-size-fits-all, but where point-to-point integrations are supported, it's attractive because, again, right, there's no middleware. You've got low latency, but there's other scenarios where you're not going to be able to do point-to-point because you're going to need an intermediate repository, right? Someone puts the data there, I'm picking it up, I'm putting it back. So they call that staging. So sometimes you're going to be able to do a direct point-to-point integration. And again, whether you're talking about on-prem systems or customer to customer or customer to Shopify, but there are some that would be indirect. And it really depends on whether you can do a direct integration. And then we go back to composition of data. If I have to compose data between the ERP and Shopify, well, that has to happen somewhere in the middle. So again, it may negate a direct communication between systems. So that's one example where I would have an indirect and I would have to use the staging data to intermediately compose data, whether it's coming down because they don't match. Their data looks like this. I have to normalize it so it fits in my system. So there's a translation that could be occurring in the middle there. So again, not talking about integration platforms at this point, but just composition versus straight in, straight out.
Yeah, you are right. And I want to touch on some of the points overall from the pros and cons perspective. And you sort of, touched on those. But then I want to make sure that they are really coming across. So when we look at the point-to-point integration, the majority of the point-to-point integration are going to be platform specific. So you require multiple skill sets. For example, let's say if you have one integration done, let's say in Shopify, the other integration done in your Visual, then third integration done in, maybe you have another e-commerce platform that you might be utilizing, or maybe a P2P platform. So each of these platforms are going to use their own integration logic that then you need to maintain the multiple skill sets. But let's say if you are using some sort of centralized hub or centralized layer, number one, you are keeping everything at one place. So you don't have to go to 5 places to be able to find the answers. And the second thing is the majority of the integration platforms are designed to be slightly more business friendly and they don't require you to build the infrastructure layer. And when I say infrastructure layer, any of the integration, when you are looking at business debugging, for example, let's say if you need to debug when you have, let's say your sales order in your e-commerce platform, then you need to find out, okay, what happened to that transaction? So that is the process that is called debugging, from the technical perspective. But even business users need to know, where the transaction is going, and they need to audit that, right? So now, if you keep everything inside your technical platform, then that becomes sort of the black box. You don't really have the visibility. But if you look at some of these middle layer or the integration platform, they will give you slightly more business friendly way of tracking these messages, as opposed to you going into the code and looking at that information, which is going to freak a lot of business people out, that now I'm actually looking at code. But some of these platforms are going to be slightly more friendly for business people to be able to debug, to be able to audit, and then you don't have to create that infrastructure layer that would be required if you actually did the point-to-point integration. Chris, you had a comment.
Yeah, just to clarify, what I was answering wasn't specifically that, but in the world where we talked about TIBCO is an integration platform we have, yes, we prefer that because all the integration IP is maintained in that tool versus having code that's hidden through my SQL Server database where people got spaghetti code. So no, we agree with a strategy on code repository and having a code repository for all the integration code that's here. But I think maybe I was answering that if I had 3 different e-commerce platforms, I don't know that I could consolidate those into a single integration to feed 3 platforms back and forth. I think the 3 integration platforms, I got 3 point-to-points, but I like the centralized integration tool that has all the code repository there because the maintenance, the management is much more efficiently managed versus having spaghetti code that's embedded, and I clean that up today in servers. So I agree with you there. The consolidated code platform, we really do emphasize the management of the integrations because sustainability, right? Someone leaves, someone comes. We know where all the integration code, all that IP is developed, and it's maintainable. And again, what else goes in there? Documentation. So that is a great strategy, and we do agree with that.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Chris. Stephanie, do you have any follow-up comments, stories, thoughts, anything that you can share on this point?
No, I've actually enjoyed listening a lot today because I said on my LinkedIn post, I love surrounding myself with people that know so much more than me because I just soak it in, and it's great stuff. And to put it in perspective, as I said, I'm at a new company. There may be things that I can learn and bring here because I'm already seeing things that we've already discussed on the talk today that don't work to create an efficient process. And we need to be efficient. I need some data to know what my vendor spend is.
Yeah.
And we as a company are headed into what they're going to call a centralized or a globalized company because we're all over the world. And therefore the reaction is one system.
Yeah.
Centralized.
Yeah.
One. And maybe that's not it. Maybe there are other ways. And so my takeaway from this is, hey, I'm not in IT, but my takeaway is, have we looked at, maybe keeping everything we have? Would it work to do something like you talk about in a hub or just reporting that we need? And it really comes down to reporting. It's the data that I need out of whatever it is. I happen to be more on the operations side than the finance side. So that adds maybe a different layer to all of this on what we want to see. But that's it. I've told you some stories already of past and what I think is here in the future. But I've just loved listening, and because I've learned a lot, and I've got some takeaways to take back.
And by the way, you have a very important takeaway there, and I want to make sure that people are really understanding that, because what you mentioned is when you have a running IT platform, is always going to be far more important and valuable than something that is not running right now. So you don't want to okay, wipe it off, bring a new platform. It doesn't work that way. Okay, in case of an IT, okay, it's always going to be far more risky, far more dangerous. So you always want to think of all of those consequences, that I have my business running on this one for last 30 years, 20 years, 10 years, whatever. Yeah. Okay, how can we make slightly more informed decision by looking at all the possibilities and then figure out a plan? Okay, if it makes sense to replace everything, okay, we will. But you need to have a game plan. And I think I'm going back to your point about this whole planning thinking, that you really need to think first on the paper that have we thought out all the consequences before just marching on the road.
Sure, but that takes skill. I think that takes outside help.
Yeah,
I
agree.
personally think so.
Okay, amazing. Tim, do you have any? Okay, Chris, you have follow-up comment on that, please.
One thing we didn't talk about was, I thought was in there, iPaaS. Integration platform as a service versus an on-prem integration tool. And I just want to make sure that from a conjecture standpoint, the other thing you're evaluating is whether point to point, but also tool selection. And I think we didn't talk about tool selection. And again, as you look at workloads, you look at concurrency, you look at latency.
Yeah.
Again, the tool in the cloud. Okay, if the apps are in the cloud, the tool in the cloud all makes sense. If the apps are on premise, the tool on premise makes more sense too, because you're not moving the data up, moving it back down. So just wanted to throw that comment out. I don't know if you were going to dig deeper into the platform and tool selection, but you need to make sure that you really verify the tool will process your workloads in a timely manner. Because I've had some people said, oh, that looks great. And when the record volume, they said, oh, it'll take 2 days to run. Oh, that's a problem. I need it to run in an hour. So don't be afraid to ask that question, because tool selection, where it's at, workloads is all part of this decision process too, in addition to the swim lanes. Because you may envision all this and then feasibly you're like, well, how do I make it happen so I can run it every hour? That's another part of the conversation. Just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you bring a very important point there. And I don't know a situation or the platform where you are not going to have some sort of hybrid arrangement, because an average enterprise uses, and I'm talking about super small companies, okay? And these are like $10 million companies. They are probably going to have 5 or 10 different softwares. They never think about the integration before buying, because these decisions are really made at the department level. They are simply buying, and then they are trying to figure out, okay, why is my vendors not reconciling? Why do I not have the centralized state of the inventory? So that's where the problem is going to be. So whenever you buy, let's say, even if it is going to cost, I don't know, $100 a month in getting that software, but if you don't think through the integration possibilities, you might be hurting yourself. And then once you actually install a tool in the department, it's going to be much harder to take it off. It's always that way because now you have your production data in that. Once that is running live, it's always much harder. So again, think through all of that before thinking about $50 versus $100 in case of an IT system. It's just not a wise strategy. But going back to your point about iPaaS, Chris, so you are absolutely right that you need to think about whether your entire tool set is going to be cloud or entire tool set is going to be on-prem. But in my experience, I think it's always going to be some sort of hybrid. You are probably going to end up having both. You are going to have some sort of on-prem, especially if you talk about Industry 4.0 scenarios. Now everybody is going to have some sort of sensor. They might require some sort of data from that. So you are probably going to end up having both. So make sure that the tool that you are selecting is going to support the hybrid scenario from the centralized integration perspective. Tim, did you have any comment there?
Yeah. So one of the things that I've been thinking about here as you guys were talking was that it's really important for those $10 million a year businesses, those smaller companies that are starting to acquire all this software, all these different packages, whether they're on premises or in the cloud. These companies are developing processes and they have an operational need for something. Sometimes they have, just somebody that wants to spend some money and thinks something's a cool widget. But what I think it's probably one of the best things those companies can do is team up with a company like Chris's and get that strategic insight into, okay, when we start bringing in more software, what should we do? Who should we talk to? Why, what is that process? What does that process look like? Instead of just randomly picking up software here and there and you end up with this Frankenstein of a system. Exactly. If you start off when you're much smaller with this mindset of, okay, we're going to bring software on, but we're going to bring it in, we're going to think about it. We're going to, go through this whole process to ensure it's going to do what we want it to do. And we can integrate it for the long term. I think that's just one of those pieces of I think you have to have that strategic partner that can help you think about those things instead of all the tactical stuff that you're dealing with day in and day out. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I completely agree. In fact, what I like to call as your ERP is probably going to be more than an ERP, and I'm probably going to have a story there as well. Just to top it off, I was working with one of the executives, and he actually acquired one of the ERP software. It was really inexpensive. It didn't really talk to their financial system, but it actually did the job. So they acquired, this was their first system. And after that, what happened is all of a sudden they actually wanted to move out from that system. Okay. And they announced it to that company that, I am trying to move out from your system So obviously the company is going to feel that, my license revenue is going to get killed. You know what happened next? They stopped picking their call. Can you believe this? Okay. They are holding their financial and operational data. Financial, and you don't have that financial or operational data in your hand. Even if you had, you are going to have a bunch of SQL files which nobody can read unless you have that software. Okay, so that's why what I like to emphasize is your ERP is more than an ERP. Even if it is costing $500 or $10,000 or $200,000, your ERP is more than an ERP. It's your business. So treat it as your business and far bigger than just a software. One of the questions that I really wanted to cover, and Chris, I'm actually going to come back to you again. This is going to be really, when you look at the iPaaS and the integration platform, there is sort of the misunderstanding overall. There is this database to database integration that you can think of, and then you have the software to software or app to app integration. A lot of people, they just don't understand this, okay? And what they do is, hey, you know what? Now the ETL tool, the Informatica, or the Azure Data Factory, or the tool that is really designed for database to database integration, it can probably call web services, it can probably read my flat files, it can probably talk to Shopify these days, right? Or maybe you can design some custom code there and make it work for Shopify. But in my experience, if you look at the design of any of these software, they are designed for a specific purpose. If you overuse them, they are never going to work as intended. You are going to have performance issues in that. So even though the software might look similar, they might be for integration, but the integration type could be different. So when you are looking at database to database integration, that's a different process. There are specific tools designed for that. Then app to app integration is going to be very different. So do you have any comment on that with respect to different integration and different tools that are available?
Yeah, and I think that knowing your data workloads, I mean, that's imperative. Meaning, am I moving 1,000 records a day, or am I moving 5 million? And I think that you got to know your workloads up front. And because the big differentiator on the tools is going to be, well, and again, how much transformation do you need to do? Meaning, to move 1 million records from zip straight across, no big deal. But if I got to do a bunch of interactions in there, but just understanding those things on the front end is going to help you gauge the performance outputs of the tools, because terminology, threads. Okay, everybody's like, what's a thread? It speaks to concurrency. So everybody's thinking, hey, I'm pushing all that data through a single straw. Oh, wow, I can get 12 of them. But what if I need 24? Oh, that tool only has 12. Okay, well, I need 24. Wrong tool. So you move upstream, and your data volumes are going to push you up into bigger ETL tools. And the problem is, as we talked, that if you make your investment on top of the wrong ETL tool, you do all the development, guess what? The integrations probably won't run in a different ETL tool. So if you have to change out ETL tools, you got to change out and redo all that work. So it's very important to get that on the front end. And again, it's all about knowing your data. And again, what's my data going to look like in 3 years? Because a lot of stuff runs great today. The business grew, and the latency goes down. So again, those are all considerations as you evaluate the tools, as concurrency, throughput, how's it going to do on workload processing, because it's all about performance and latency at the end of the day. In cost, I'm going to tell you right now that every thread, every swim lane costs more per month. So, I want to move all this data. It's like, oh, maybe I'm not going to move all that data. Anyway, I'm being funny, but you get the idea. Some key things to look at, though.
Yeah, and one of my personal takeaway from this comment is going to be, there is this notion that, especially in the sales community, people just like to oversell. And some of these sales and marketing folks in the technical community, they have never implemented an IT system in their life. To be honest, they don't even know what they are talking about. So I'll give you an example. For example, any of the ERP system or the integration system, they are designed for a specific market. They are designed for a specific market segment. They are designed for a specific use case. For example, let's say if you buy a car, okay, if you buy Corolla, okay, Corolla you are going to buy when you have, let's say, 1 member, 2 member, maybe, not more than that. You know that when your family grows, then you probably need a SUV. This is how your IT systems work. You cannot process, let's say, if a system is designed for 500,000 transactions, the way Chris described, you cannot process 5 million transactions in that platform. If you try to do that, it's going to kill the hell out of the system. Okay.
Sam, with our company that I was with before, we decided to move to Visual, which is a manufacturing-based software. Yep. But we were moving and strategically knew we were headed to an e-commerce type company.
Yep.
And so your first question to me was, why the heck did you get rid of NetSuite?
Exactly.
That is your more e-commerce friendly type platform than Visual that's really for your shop floor type situation. And again, that's one of those things we learned in hindsight, but one of the things that you have to know kind of what you're dealing with before you make that jump. Takes experts to help.
Go ahead, Chris, please.
One more quick comment I forgot. A lot of these integration tools have pre-built connectors, meaning this adapter knows about Salesforce. That's important because if you're integrating Salesforce, you don't want to teach the integration tool about Salesforce. It knows if it knows Salesforce, so don't be afraid to ask it. Does it have an adapter for Salesforce or for Shopify or for NetSuite? Because a lot of them do have some pre-built IP. That'll save you some time. So, final comment, sorry.
So guys, fascinating discussion. We are close to our time right now. So the only thing we can do is we can take closing advice. So Chris, what is going to be your closing advice?
Just kick the tires. Again, make sure you know your data before you get into it and make sure you don't run out of tool in 12 or 18 months. You got to make sure you make a buy that's going to last you 5+ years.
Love it. Thank you so much, Chris. Stephanie, what is going to be your closing advice?
It's not the people at the top that should necessarily be making these decisions that we've talked about today. It's great to have the leader of the company, but it really needs to, you need to have somebody at the top that understands that you need experts to help with all the things that we're talking about today. This isn't just something that anybody can just jump in and just do. It takes a lot of time, a lot of preparation.
Love it. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for that. Tim, what is your closing advice?
Ask why. Ask why are we integrating? What's the purpose? What value does it bring to the business?
Yeah, love it, guys. On that note, thank you so much, guys, for joining today.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Chris Gherardini, head over to turnkeytech.com. It's turnkeytec.com. If you want to learn more about Tim Harrison, head over to warmcommerce.com. It's warmmerce.com. If you want to learn more about Stephanie Schrader, head over to scientificgames.com. It's scientificgames.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Susan Walsh, who discusses how to normalize your product, customer, and vendor data to avoid planning and forecasting issues with your inventory. Also, the interview with Brett Bobeff, who provides insight into whether moving to the cloud guarantees business transformation. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.